Please be seated. This Parliament is back in order. Member for Georgetown Central, continuing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before we took the evening recess, Mr. Speaker, I was getting closer to the end of my contribution. And Mr. Speaker, I think that the emphasis of concern that I've highlighted them, and the three particular areas of concern. I must say, Mr. Speaker, most members are fully aware of my energy and spirit to debate. But I must say that I've come to a crossroads of, again, in my political career. And I've been deflated by an exercise that transpired throughout the break. Mr. Speaker, in everything that I've done thus far, I've tried to be informed. I've tried to hold account to what I believe is the right way of doing things. We were given promises of information. Information was not delivered. And even at the 11th hour and 59 minutes and 59 seconds, still can't get information. Mr. Speaker, a particular area of concern for members was Clause 10. And in Clause 10 of this bill speaks to the requirement of persons granted Cayman status and prescribe particulars in respect to declaration by members annually. Mr. Speaker, being granted status in their own application as opposed to being granted status when married to a Caymanian, in my humble opinion, has two different categories of priority and sensitivity. Mr. Speaker, when you become a Caymanian, there's a level of authority that comes with it, privilege and so forth. And I question how far we're willing to go into people's lives, particularly when we get into marriages, still at the same time recognizing the necessity for the Department of Work and its director to be able to prove marriages of convenience, as they're called today. And since I'm on that point, I think it's time for us to stop calling them marriages of convenience and properly use the term that's used in the United Kingdom, which is sham marriages. Because every marriage has a convenience. That's a simple fact. And I think the UK recognizing the terminology as sham marriages should be something we should hopefully in the future amend within this legislation to change. But Mr. Speaker, it is very important that when asking members of this Honourable House to support an amendment to this bill, which will mandate an annual declaration of prescribed particulars, to know what they're going to be. Throughout this journey of discussion and spirit of collaboration, we asked what that meant. We were told, particularly for those who are married to Caymanian, it was an annual declaration to suggest that your marriage was still in good standing. Nothing more. Just to confirm the sensitivities of things, I've, throughout the break, went to the Honourable Minister as well as the team to give specifics as to what that is, because there was never a point where parties said they didn't want to give us the draft regulations as to what the particulars would be. They said they had the draft regulations, but they can't give it to me as a member of Parliament. It would have to be for the minister to give it to us. Now imagine, I'm in here in Parliament and the government wants to put the pressure on me to say, vote for this, this is the right thing. But I can't get the information that is necessary for me to vote for this particular part because I don't know what the particulars are you're going to ask the applicants. And it's not like they don't know, Mr. Speaker. Imagine they look at me and tell me they know what it is, but they're not going to give it to us. Talk about transparency. I'm not going to vote for that section based on principle alone. So nobody in the country knows what the particulars are going to be that are going to be asked of these individuals. You know, that's when you realize that member of parliament don't really mean nothing. Asking for what they are, they won't even lie to you and say, well, boy, you don't got it yet. They got it. Won't provide it to this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, how can the minister and this government ask me to support a section in this that speaks about the particulars? They know what the particulars are. In order for me to understand the delivery of this section and clause, they say they won't give it to us. I guess the parliament don't have the right to know. Is that what the minister is saying? That parliament don't have the right to know what it is supporting? I want to know if every member on the government side is fully aware of what those particulars are going to be. They're going to be asking people. Is it going to be what kind of socks you wore on Tuesday? Here's what they say, Mr. Speaker. You're going to be required to the same provisions upon which you're obligated to when you apply in the first place. And some of those provisions are something simple as you have to be resident in the Cayman Islands for 5 years. So I pose a simple question. Because again, I said, Mr. Speaker, this one is about people who are married to Caymanians. If you apply for it in your own right, totally different category. Let's just say I'm married and my wife. We decide to say, you know what? I'm going to move to England for 5 years. Have I broken the law? Will my wife lose her status? That's what the requirements currently are. But the refusal to give to a member of parliament the particulars when they have them and then they say they're being transparent is ludicrous. Minister, can you explain to this House when you have the information agreed upon amongst your team, but you refuse to offer it to members of parliament? I ask each member on the government side, do you know what the list of the particulars are going to be mandatory for members to report every year? Do you know? Do you know, member from West Bay West? Sorry, Mr. Speaker. You know what? It's days like this I feel like I just want to give up. But I know where the truth lies now. I know. Because the minister himself don't know. I know where the pressure coming from. I know where the lack of wanting to give information is coming from now, Mr. Speaker. And I'm so disappointed tonight. But I know. Ask your minister if you don't understand what's happening. Ask him. Don't want to provide details to this bill to members of this House, but have the information, hiding it, but expect us to vote on things. Ask him. Don't ask me. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the minister has committed to better efficiency as a basis of the approval of this bill. I will hold him to that. Because the labor environment is essential to proper operations of our economy. You can't use it as a narrative to support this without committing to do so. And I am almost certain that they don't have their ducks in a row to offer that efficiency. They haven't added any budget to it. They haven't addressed it. I think it's called the ISSM system or the ISMM system that has been dysfunctional for how many years, not updated. And these vast changes will only cause more headaches for work. So, for the business community, feel sorry for them for the next 6 months to a year. And when the licks start coming, promise you Kenneth Bryan coming with it. Remember telling her that. That being said, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to wrap up my contribution because I'm so deflated by what has expired throughout the break. So disappointed in what has transpired when ultimately members are fully aware of what we're trying to get and they talk about, oh, we tried to work with the opposition, tried to give the information so we were all in agreement, even at the 11th hour, still trying to get information, they refuse to give it. I am genuinely concerned, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to read something that I wrote a while back because I went off track. I wrote a nice speech and everything else, going to be very complimentary and all that, but I had to go south quickly after much of what I heard throughout the debate. But I'm going to read a section that I did create about the potential for perceived abuse of power or potential unfairness due to the lack of criteria necessary for the discretion of the director. Mr. Speaker, the danger of unchecked power, there's clauses in this bill that grant the board undefined discretion to the director of work. Now, we recognize that the degree of this discretion is necessary to address the seriousness of the abuse of marriages of convenience, now soon to be sham marriages. And we support the intention to strengthen that. However, Mr. Speaker, without clear statutory criteria and standards guiding that discretion, this legislation, which will be then strengthened by regulation, which we have not even seen a draft copy of, creates a dangerous environment ripe for manipulation, bias, and even the abuse of power. Now, I know some members have suggested, how dare we question the integrity of the team? That's what they said. I remember it quite clearly. But I tell you what, my concern about integrity has gone through the roof tonight after the exercise I just went through. The exercise of trying to falter around the realities of whether they had it or not, and then when I put the pressure on the minister to say, Minister, they're saying that you have to give the approval to get it. I call the minister, he come over, and then whisper, oh, we can't give it to you. You hear any other nonsense like that in this house? Now, we need the regulations to understand what this bill is ultimately going to do, and we're being told they got it, but they're not going to share it with us. Do you, government members, have any concerns about that process? About something as critical as employment and what employment means to our economy? No shame. Nothing. Mr. Speaker, as I opened, I said that the opposition has listened intently to the voice of the people. We accept the calls for greater protection for our Caymanian workers and for smarter economic controls over our labor market. We know that the public anxiety is real. We hear it, we feel it, we see it. And the need for modernization to secure and improve fair legislative framework is indisputable. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, in my closing, as I speak directly to the thousands of Caymanians who feel frustrated and unheard, we support the government in respect to those changes, no doubt. But when we start the thorough process of doing things right, when we start to let political stunts get in the way of proper solutions, I genuinely start to get concerned. Mr. Speaker, as I speak to the many anxious Caymanians, I know that you demand change now, and I know it's right for you to seek for a brighter future, but I ask you to do some due diligence, to examine how our economy works, and don't fall only for sound bites. They're going to say that it was us, as if to say the opposition did nothing. They'll say they didn't do it, but recognize that 4 members of their own government has caused us not to get it to the Honourable House in the first place. We must approach this problem in a very strategic and delicate way to ensure that the rush to fix one problem, Mr. Speaker, we do not sacrifice the very core of the economy upon which we rely. We must do this right, or we risk our dependence on our economy, which I highlighted many times, is service-based and highly relies on outside labor. Mr. Speaker, the duty of a responsible opposition, and indeed the core responsibility of any credible government, is to be intelligent enough to know what the right balance is and how far is too far before creating unforeseen and ultimately more damaging issues for our economy and for the very stability of our labor market. Mr. Speaker, my job was to try to critically examine, give enough contribution, even though some people will take it out of context, to be able for us all to think about what we're doing, but also to put it in the Hansards. Because the good thing we know is we still got 3 years and 4 months to go. And everything that is being said today, whether it has any damages to the economy, particularly on the labor side, as I said before, if you want to start giving away statuses tomorrow and put a moratorium on that for the next 10 years, I have no problem. Outside of descendants and marriages, I'm quite fine with it. But the labor market and the controls you have over it, the effect on family life, you will be examined. Mr. Speaker, as I said, I gave notice to amendments that I'll be presenting, and I am ultimately, possibly, if we have time, with your leeway, with the knowledge of not being presented with the facts of what the particulars are going to be, I cannot support that section, and therefore I'm going to ask for it to be removed. The decent thing the minister can do is maybe in his wrap-up, give the public and this parliament what those particulars are going to be. It's unfair to ask any member to vote for it without being willing to list it. And that being said, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for giving me the honor to address this parliament in respect to this bill before us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to offer a short contribution. I rise to provide a short contribution, Mr. Speaker, to this most serious and far-reaching first step in immigration reform. Mr. Speaker, let me first congratulate the Minister, the Honorable Michael Miles, and his entire team. I don't need to list them out, that has been done a number of times, for the amount of work that has gone into getting us thus far. It would be remiss of me if I didn't also thank those in the previous administration who were agitating and advocating for change in immigration. And it has been said that we as a country did get to the point where a white paper was issued. I cannot erase or recreate history, and I would never ever seek to do that in Parliament. That would be very much unparliamentary, and that would not be something that I would ever do, and certainly that my parents would approve of me doing. So let me ensure that the public understands that however you want to slice it or dice it, yes, a white paper was put forward. I think at the time it was my good friend, a member from Bordentown East, who was responsible at the time in the ministry. That being said, a lot of hard work has now gone in to pick the ball up and get it to this point. And the fact is, as has been alluded to by the honourable member, the honourable deputy leader of the opposition and member for Georgetown Central, the fact is that you have to have your entire government support to get to this point. And I think that I ought to pause to not only congratulate the minister, but the entire NCFC team, because as we all know in the process, a minister just can't bring a bill to Parliament. It takes the entire government. And so the government has been brave within the first 7 months of our administration to take on what is always going to be controversial reform. As the Honourable Leader of the Opposition said in his contribution yesterday, there'll be those who say we've gone too far. There'll be those who say we've not gone far enough. Having been around Parliament from 2000 and having sat on the first immigration review team that created this modern immigration infrastructure, this system of progressive rights that got us out of the dark ages in immigration and got us to a point where we weren't at real legal risk at the time. Because how quickly the country forgets the mess that existed in 2000 when I first got elected. In fact, as I look around this chamber, on the elected side, there was only two of us here at that time, myself and the lady member from Caymanbrack East. And she well knows the mess that existed in immigration, where we had some 20,000+ people in this country who had been here for over 5 years. We had more than 10,000 people in the country at the time who had been here for over 10 years at the time, with no hope in sight, because the then immigration law just had no systemized way for you to even get on the train to security of tenure. And of course, the United Kingdom and the courts was pounding down the doors of the government to do something because it was seen as a real human rights threat and risk for Her Majesty's government. Now, the current bill builds upon the very first modern immigration infrastructure that was created in 2004. I'm a bit of a historian and librarian in this government because, as I said, not a single one of them were here. They talk about pressure now. Talk about the pressure of the governor's office continually asking the government, what are you going to do about immigration? The pressures of a case being taken to court and the court ruling against the government as it related to Caymanian status of a particular individual, which of course jump-started the process for us to ensure that we had to get immigration across the finish line because of the real threat and fear that masses of people were going to actually then follow suit and sue the Cayman Islands government, and they would have been successful. How do I know? Because the court had already, in its ruling, warned the government that this would be the way in which it was going to interpret what was deemed an illegal moratorium at the time. And so, having given just that little bit of history that gets us to this point, what has been interesting is that we created in that 2004 a progressive system of rights and benefits with a rollover policy where everyone who came into this country knew the rules up front, knew what was at stake. Was the piece of legislation perfect? No. But I tell you what, knowing where you stood, ensuring that the immigration law stood as a key gatekeeper to how population growth was going to be controlled and managed in this country was sure better than the subsequent amendments that lead us to today. I am not going to get into what has happened in the last decade because that would be terribly unhelpful today. Save us to say that in my humble opinion, a lot of these changes that we're seeing are simply reversing back to the position or near the position of the 2004 law. And so for those in the public who somehow have confused the fact that the 2004 law got immigration wrong, I would vigorously disagree with that assertion. It did more to get us to a point where we got the system right than the position that exists today. So much so that in 2025, in the ramp up to the election, I think every member who has been elected ran on the basis of immigration change. However, Mr. Speaker, I didn't just run on the basis of immigration change. On page 4, 5, and 6 of my manifesto, I detailed out a high-level summary the proposed changes that I would want to be seen in immigration if elected. And so I can say with great confidence that I was elected on a mandate to reform immigration. I didn't just say we needed immigration reform in a loosey-goosey way. I went into detailing out what the current status was and then detailing the key drivers for reform. And Mr. Speaker, I spoke to several factors necessitating immigration reform for our country. That is protection of Caymanians. And I said, for too long, work permits and the tick box point system has eroded any protection for Caymanians and the Cayman Islands from the manipulative and irresponsible business and elected leadership. Other countries use their immigration law and policies to protect their citizens and country from intentional and unintentional abuses and their attendant results. Such abuse and neglect must stop immediately. Economic growth. The island's economic expansion, particularly in tourism and finance, demands skilled labor. Current immigration policies must adapt to ensure that the labor market needs are met without overwhelming or displacing local labor. As local labor is systematically pushed aside, unemployment rate increase. This leads to increased demand for government financial assistance services and the weakening of our families. Simply put, the current system is counter to growth as it displaces Caymanians and forces them to depend on government assistance, lose their homes, and forego medical care as they cannot access the labor market. Social integration. The diverse expatriate population requires policies that promote integration and respect the Caymanian culture while fostering a multicultural society. All this was in my manifesto. Population growth. As the population grows, the strain on infrastructure, healthcare, and education systems increases. Effective immigration reform can help manage these pressures by controlling the rate and nature of population growth. And then, Mr. Speaker, I went in to what I had as my proposed reforms. Mr. Speaker, I won't bore the House with going through every single one of them because I am cognizant of the hour and I did promise that I would be brief. Save that, though, I would say that there are a number of areas that we are going to have to continue this reform agenda. Mr. Speaker, this can compare so much to government fee increases. When you don't strategically reform immigration to keep pace with the needs of the labor market and the wishes around population growth of our permanent population, every time you then make a change, it seems and feels like it's this massive change because we have not kept pace with the times. I believe wholeheartedly that these changes will serve as a platform for growth in our economy. It will be good for social harmony because it seeks to remedy a large number of very long-standing, vexing issues. And so that is why the member from Georgian Central went to such pains. That whilst he had a number of points, one in particular that he disagrees with, and then I'm not sure what caused the last kerfuffle, because I wasn't privileged to the conversation that he had, where he said there's some information that wasn't shared. But other than that, he took great pains to make sure he continued going back to the point that he supports the bill, because he knows that immigration reform is critically important to our country. And so I believe all of us agree with that. I believe all of us recognizes the necessity for us to progress our immigration system, to remedy and fix the very vexing, long-standing issues we face. I will say, on reflection, there is one point that as I sat on that first immigration review team that was commissioned in 2001 until 2003, which culminated in that first modern immigration law that we had, was that change in terms of the number of years a person had to wait to get Caymanian status by virtue of marriage. Because need I remind the House that it was 15 years. It was the 2004 law that changed it to 7, with a 3-year wait period before it became quote-unquote permanent. And so I hear the member from Georgetown Central in saying, look, why don't you leave it as it is and simply extend the period of time which it becomes permanently revocable, or I guess automatically revocable, and make that be the way in which you quote-unquote manage and mitigate around the abuses that we know. Because let's not play any, we're not getting into any pretend scheme. Every single one of us know that the marriage to Caymanians is and has been abused. Now, that's not to say that there aren't good and wholesome marriages, and I agree with the member completely. And so, which way do you go? Do you extend out and do you have it as drafted in the current form in the bill, or do you go with what the member said? Look, let's be a little more. I'm going to use the word lenient. I'm not saying that's what he means, but in terms of acquiring Caymanian status and then having a longer runway in terms of if you get divorced, let's say within the next 8, 10 years or whatever, after that, then you would lose it, right? And in my mind, that's the essence of what the member is saying, right? That's the essence of what he's saying. And so, look, I'm not going to stand here and say that I have some magic insight into the future and to say which one of those approaches would be better. What I can say is, and he is in agreement, and I think that would mean that the entire House is in agreement, is that what exists right now in legislation needs to be changed. Another point that we all ought to turn our attention to is around the fact around who should have and enjoy the right to be able to pass on Caymanian status. I personally come from a train of thought that if you are not born with something that you have as of right, you should not be able to pass it on. I do not believe that you should be able to get Caymanian status through grant, and then you become a person that can pass it on to another person. Let me be very clear. In that first immigration review team, we, through our research, saw numerous instances where within months of a person, through marriage, acquiring Caymanian status, divorced their then Caymanian spouse, married a non-national, and then passed Caymanian status on to that person. It cannot be right. It cannot be logical that we should have a legal infrastructure that allows a person to be granted a right via law that they can then pass on to other people. You should only be able to pass on what you are born with as of right. That is my personal opinion, that is my position, and it has been one of those instances that I have always said that if I had a regret in terms of that first IRT I sat on, was that we didn't address that particular point from back then. It was a missed opportunity, it was a missed point, and certainly it is a point that I think this Parliament ought to now remedy. Because we cannot continue to have a country that operates with that sort of system, in my humble opinion. Mr. Speaker, there has been much said, and I am not going to get into a back and forth with any member, because I feel I'm in a very generous mood on a Thursday. And so I just want to address a couple of what I think are critically important points for us to ensure that we put out there as a parliament. And I'm going to try my entire best, Mr. Speaker, not to repeat, because a number of points have already been made. Mr. Speaker, members have talked about the mood that this government has created, that we have created an us and them. Mr. Speaker, if members of this House wanted to have an environment in which there was not going to be an us and them, in my humble opinion, the white paper that was published earlier this year should have been titled the Caymanian Integration Law. That law, the proposal, in that white paper, was that the Cayman Immigration Law be renamed the Cayman Protection Law. So this air of us and them that now gets placed at my doorstep and the doorstep of this government is a very unfair and uncharitable one. The white paper, Mr. Member from Georgetown Central, that you touted that you were part of getting to a white paper, hold on, but you the one that made the point, went from the immigration law to the Cayman Protection Law. You don't think that that contributed to an us and them? I'm just asking a question, Mr. Speaker. It's a rhetorical question. We all know the answer to the question. Come on. But that's a little bit of political gamesmanship. We know how these things go. As I said, Mr. Speaker, very charitable mood I'm in. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to how we are going to integrate people into our community, whether they wind up here for a short period of time and leave, or they wind up here and get permanent residence and status, is critically important to not only population control, but as all members have said, but I heard the member from Georgian Central pound the point quite vociferously, it is a key economic model that has to be created. And the member is 110% right. So is the member from Bordentown West. How we go about crafting immigration policy is, on one hand, in large measure, a key economic policy position that we're taking. And we, as a government, clearly understand that. But it needs to be something that the public understands, that this just isn't about who gets Caymanian status. This is also about how we maintain and grow our economy to ensure that all Caymanians benefit, whether they're an employer or an employee. Because the reality is, the economic activity and the multiplier effect in the economy is what drives our standard of living. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And so I believe that this bill does a whole lot more to improve the lot and prospects of Caymanians than the current position. I believe this bill is a huge upgrade. There is never going to be a perfect piece of legislation. Certainly within the next 6-12 months, once all of this is operationalized, we may very well be back here for an amendment. And that ought not to be something that alarms the public. The one thing that I have observed over the years is that governments pass legislation, move on to the next big thing that they want to address, and then don't correct expeditiously the cracks that they see. Instead of coming back and saying to the public, look, here is something that's really not working as was planned, We now need to amend it, plain and simple. And I for the life of me, cannot understand why we as Caymanians who have been elected to this honorable house behave that way. The public expects us to do our best to fix problems. And so, while we may take our first best stab at an issue, we then need to ensure that we monitor it, and where we have to amend, we amend. That is our duty. That is why the public sent us here. The public didn't send us here to then look on and say there's a problem. We're supposed to be the fixers of the problem. Mr. Speaker, I'll get to that in a minute. Mr. Speaker, let me just say, because I said it during the budget, and I'll say it now, I don't know who the Trumpsters were that the member from Georgetown Central have spoken about, but I can tell the world this. I was born to two Caymanian parents at the Georgetown Hospital. I can tell the world on the Anglian side of my family, my great-great-grandfather was the first Anglian to come here. Philip Anglin from Jamaica. Power side goes back a little further. The E-Bank sides go back way further. The Bush side goes back way further. For me to now hear people say that get up and be apologetic about being pro-Caymanian, well, let me be very, very clear. I, Ralston Malachi Anglin, born on the 5th day of February 1972. I'm a Caymanian, true and true. I will stand and I will defend the public of this country to the best of my ability and with research to the best of my knowledge. And I am here to further the interests of the people of the Cayman Islands, point blank. If there's somebody out there who's now going to try to insult my intelligence to say that that statement is divisive, then I will say to them, they are greatly mistaken that they think that I would be mentally weak enough to then start to be apologetic. I cannot go with any rights to Jamaica, Philippines, India, Canada, America, Ireland, Australia, or anywhere else. I'm a Caymanian. And the fact is, any decent human being who immigrates to another country, who themselves don't recognize that that ought to be the way in which a national of their country behaves, is themselves either clearly, in my opinion, mentally defected, or they themselves are simply lying because they would do the same thing in their country. For us to hear the word xenophobic, yet in this country we have, in 90,000 people, we have over 100 nationalities. In this country, more than 50% of the population are non-nationals. Well, boy, I tell you what, Caymanians are pretty poor at being xenophobic. Caymanians are pretty poor at being xenophobic, because to create that sort of environment and to have the social harmony that we do, it's an insult when anyone says that. Caymanians are that's the problem. That's been one of our problems for too long. We have been too open, too docile. And so then you get people who want to browbeat you so that you then will say, oh, well, yeah, well, you know, because I say I'm for Caymanians, don't mean I'm not against anybody else. I don't need to tell anybody who I'm against. What I can say is who I'm for. I am a Caymanian. I'm proud to be a Caymanian. Now let me be clear. Let me be clear. In 1990, and I've said this in many, many forums, and I've said this before in this parliament, first time I was elected. I was given a scholarship by 2 Englishmen. The 2 senior partners at the firm were Englishmen. The staff manager was an Englishman. Back then, the firm was too small to have an HR manager. Mr. Mike Target will remember those days when the firms were that small. No one at that firm could ever say, truthfully, that I was not a team player and did not embrace people from every walk of life and every country. But at the same time, I am also going to be a fierce defender of Caymanians, and I am going to call a spade, and we have to acknowledge that a part of immigration reform is because of the abuses. Plain and simple. There have been many Caymanians who have been systematically excluded from the economy. The system is such that it's so opaque that right now, whilst the team at work gets to see some of the abuses, it's but a tip of the iceberg as to what's happening to some Caymanians in the economy. We've heard for years about Caymanians who couldn't get article clerkships despite getting a 2-1 or above degree. We've stood here and talked and debated about the fact that we need to be getting our Caymanians back home. That shouldn't even be a point that we're talking about. Shouldn't even be a point that we're talking about. And so, I accept that the work that was started in 2011 or thereabouts, when I was Minister of Education at the time, and we had gotten a national database to the beta testing, national manpower database to the beta testing stage. What does that mean? We're at the point where we were actually inputting data to see how the database would work and make sure that we could iron out the kinks. Yet today, myself and the minister responsible for Caymanian employment and immigration are still talking about having to create a national database so that we can make the transition of our Caymanians coming home on scholarship or graduating from one of our local universities a seamless one. That is how opaque our labor market is. We do need to get to the point where through our immigration reform and policies, every Caymanian child is getting an internship over the summer. And if companies don't want to participate, they ought not to have access to work permits. Government has to take on hundreds, yet we have profitable small and medium-sized companies who absolutely don't participate in anything called internships for Caymanians. So I agree with the member from Georgetown Central. We do need to incentivize, but I also will tell him, sometimes the best incentive is a sledgehammer too. I come from the old school. There are times where government, through legislation, has to do what it has to do because there are people who will choose to do what they want to do, not in the interest of our people. And that's where government must stand in the gap and ensure that we have a system where everyone participates. It can't just be government and a couple of big companies that participate. And so we are going to work assiduously to get the data, because that has been a legitimate excuse from the business community that they don't have the data. And quite frankly, that's deplorable in 2025. A business owner, if you look at my manifesto, every company should be mandated to be subscribers of the new National Manpower Database so that they can search. If you're a small engineering firm, you can look and you can search and you can say, I want to see who's going to be graduating in 2027 with a physical engineering degree, and it's a 3.0 above GPA. They get the information back. They can offer that young person an internship for the summer, make sure it's a good match for their organization. They get used to that young person. That young person gets used to them. And in 2 years' time, they can plan. They can plan their HR arrangements. So I completely get the point that the lack of data, which, let's be very clear, we call a spade, that's on government. We're the ones spending $35+ million a year on scholarships. The least we should be able to do is provide the data as to who is being funded and how they are performing. And so that's a commitment. And that is going to be a key anchor in the way forward with immigration and labor reform. We have to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that all of our training is aligned. In fact, members would have heard me saying, and I'm happy to report, that I am just about to sign off on the creation of a ministerial committee that is going to create the national priority areas of study. It is going to be drawing from the private sector, and it is going to be run by the ministry. We're going to include a couple of participants, current members of the scholarship secretariat to provide the secretarial support. We're going to include 2 members from Education Council, because we must be laser focused on the needs of our economy. We must be providing the skills that the labor market needs so that our young people have the best opportunity for success. Let me give you a real-life story. I got an email last week from a young lady, young Caymanian lady, who is about to graduate from university. And she sent me her resume. And she's undertaking a fantastically sounding degree. One of the issues that we face in a modern system of tertiary education is that so many large universities in large countries are offering a much wider diversity of degrees than certainly in my days. And so you can get degrees on organizational change with an emphasis on entrepreneurship. That wasn't something, Mr. McTaggart, that I would have ever dreamt about when we went to university. But that's a double-edged sword, because here's the reality of it. Would that young person have been better off with that specific degree or with an accounting degree? We have to be real. We just had a meeting with SIPA. Mr. McTaggart, 754 accountants is their current count on the gap that's needed in the economy. So, Mr. Speaker, 754. Do you know how many years it would take to fill that gap? Here's the reality of this situation. We can all get up in this house and talk about whatever. We can't have all of this and all of that. All people be this and all people be that. What I can tell everyone in this house, any of you who've had any experience, especially in business and paid attention to the labor market, here's what we need. We need lawyers. We need accountants. We need engineers. We need healthcare professionals, that is nurses, med techs, and doctors. We need persons with engineering, and we need technology degrees. We are not New York City. We are not London. We are not a country with millions of people, and therefore the economy is so wide that you can send your young people off and do a wide variety of degrees, and they're able to fit seamlessly back into the economy. That requires government policy. So to answer the member from Georgetown Central when he asked, when is that going to happen? I can tell him that I'm happy to report that work will start, and we will have that report. The date that's been set is 31st of March 2026. They'll give the report on the national priority areas of study, and by 31st of May, they're giving their recommendations on how we should be reforming the actual scholarship criteria and award system. It has to happen. We cannot continue to just throw money away. Say, guess what? We spent this amount without having impact. The impact has to be setting our young people up for success, setting them up to ensure that there is success for them in the labor and employment market. If we're not doing that, then we are failing. We are failing them. We cannot have countless young people come back to Cayman and employers look on and say, that's not exactly what I need for my business. We cannot allow that to continue to happen, because it goes from what sounds like an excuse to then a legitimate reason. We need to feed the economy. We need to be truthful and open and honest with this country, with our community, with our young people, and ensure they understand what the needs are and what will lead to a highly successful career and a highly rewarding career, so that they can be able to be on that ladder to become the next Caymanian millionaire. We shouldn't even be shy about that being something that we are pushing. We shouldn't be shy about that. Why should we be ashamed of that? Look at the size of our financial services industry. And members in this chamber know what I'm about to say is absolutely true. I know for a fact Mr. McTaggart knows, and I know for a fact Mr. Saunders knows. I know for a fact the Premier knows. Who else worked at Mr. Panton knows, because all of us worked at what would be big firms. We have dozens and dozens of young professionals landing in this country every year who within 5 to 10 years of being in Cayman, they are millionaires. That's a fact. That's a fact. Why shouldn't we be, as parliamentarians, telling this country the truth? I am here to say we will not, with our numbers, because of the size of our community, we cannot produce enough accountants. And look at the highly rewarding career it leads to. Not everyone has to be an auditor. The managing director of Butterfield Bank was a former audit manager from, I think it was Coopers and Lybrand. But that's where he wound up. Right. Okay? So starting off as an accountant doesn't mean that you have to stay with an accounting firm, but it provides you the type of skill set that can lead to so many other professions wherever you may want to go. And I'm not saying this because I'm an accountant, because I've not been very good at promoting my own profession. I got 5 children, but 3 of my daughters are all going to be lawyers. So it's not that I have tried to push. I don't try to push anything on any young person, not even my own. But the point that I'm making is, Mr. Speaker, we have to align our national priority areas of study with the needs of the economy. Now, that does not mean that we're not going to allow young Caymanian children to chase their dream. But let's be honest. Let's just say a young person who's extremely into the sciences and want to get into quantum physics. There isn't a job in Cayman for you. You're going to have to work at NASA or some type of entity like that. Does that mean that we as a government say no to that young person? I personally don't believe in that approach, but we have to be very clear. We have to be strategic. We have to be upfront. We need to make sure that what we're doing is about building a pathway to success. Everything we do in education is going to impact the labor market. And so we might as well plan it properly and ensure that what we're doing is transparent, that we're upfront. My minister's transparent, upfront with what we're doing. Mr. Speaker, this bill and the work that is taking place in the Ministry for Cayman and Employment, along with the Ministry of Education and other ministries being hemmed up and ensuring that our early childhood care and education system becomes first class. IEP gets additional funding so that we can rescue children at the earliest stages, set them up for success. No, you don't see the results tomorrow, but you can change the course of a life from those first few years of life. Having that sort of strategic focus impacts immigration. It impacts it because we provide the skills and the human capital that our economy desperately needs, and that is how we build a successful Cayman, in my humble opinion. I used to have an old saying when I was first elected around these parts: everything affects everything. And therefore, everything that the Ministry of Culture, the Department of Social Services, the Ministry of Health, with its practitioners who see children at the earliest possible stages and can see someone who has a special or an additional education need, needs to be working in harmony with the Ministry of Education to ensure that a person's life chances are optimized. That is the work that is important for us, because if we do that right, in 10 years' time, these immigration debates will be one of ensuring that we're just tinkering at the edges around who gets to come and who gets to be here permanently or not permanently, as the member from Georgian Central talked about. That is really where we need to get to. Because if we take care of the economic and the labor piece of this puzzle, that is what's going to be the true test of how well these reforms actually work out in the long term. But let us not mistake, the population side of this is incredibly important as well. Let us not downplay that. Firstly, we have to have a system that withstands international scrutiny. We had prior governments, Mr. Speaker, you're going to know what I'm talking about. We had prior governments who put in place moratoriums and other things that courts didn't agree with. And so we also have a mother country who's going to look at whatever reforms we put in place to ensure that people do have rights under our law. But we can put the gatekeeping provisions in as long as they're reasonable. And I don't believe that there's anything unreasonable in this bill, or certainly in the reformed agenda that the good minister is undertaking. Because he, like all of us, understands how important it is to move this process forward. This isn't just a political statement. This is something we owe our people, owe our economy, owe to our children, owe to all stakeholders in this country. Because immigration cuts across so much of what is the lifeblood of every country. Mr. Speaker, we know we've had talk for years about the acquisition of real estate and how many points you got on a point system for it. We clearly understand that one policy, it was 30 points, has greatly contributed when you combine that with eliminating the 7-year rollover has greatly contributed to the spike in land prices in this country. Supply and demand. Plain and simple. Way more professionals who came to Cayman, looked on and said, oh, no rollover, good, good. Tick that box. Can I afford property? Tick that box. How many points do I get for acquiring property? Tick that box. Now let me go get property. When demand exceeds supply, prices go up. Economics 101. And it has greatly contributed to the uplift in land and property values, which has eliminated so many Caymanians from the property ladder. And you see, that is where you have to be so careful. That's why I said everything affects everything. That is why we have to be so careful when we're crafting immigration legislation, because that, for example, was one of the true unintended consequences. I don't believe there was no parliamentarian that looked on and said, oh, well, you know what? This is going to cause Caymanians to be crowded out of the property market. Let's do it. Unintended consequence. But, as I said earlier, you see a problem, you talk about a problem, and we're the legislators and we don't fix the problem. When we see the problems, colleagues, we must fix them. We absolutely must fix them. Mr. Speaker, I believe that as we progress with their immigration reform agenda, the public is going to see that there's going to be a balance that ensures the economic sustainability of the country while balancing the population needs and the wishes and wants of Caymanians on that side of the equation. And it is for that reason that I wholeheartedly give my support to this immigration amendment piece of legislation. I say to all members, I heard the member from Georgetown Central. I heard him. From what I can gather, there's one provision that he has a particular angst around, and then I don't know where the other thing that went off the rails. He'll have to tell me that on the break. I don't know what happened there. But other than that, he seemed to have been a happy camper all week. And so I was really disappointed that today he didn't end up as a happy camper, because he knows that I like to see him as a happy camper. Because then he doesn't get up here and speak for an hour and 45 minutes. So I hope, I say that in jest. Look, colleagues, the best thing in immigration reform, and any bill that is of true national importance and that is highly controversial, is to have us joined up at the hip. Let us see what we can do to ensure that we all agree and can all vote aye with a clean and clear conscience for this bill. This ought to be a rallying cry of national unity from this chamber. We ought to be saying to the country, look, politics aside, we saw what was in the best interest of the people of the Cayman Islands, the people that all of us collectively represent, and therefore we all joined in chorus and supported the bill. Let us take the politics out of it, colleagues. And Mr. Speaker, I know that the member from Georgetown Central thought that I was going to get up and I was going to, as he said when he was leaving the chamber, bash him or something like that he said. But as he have seen, today is Thursday. And so we, on this side, extend a true olive branch, an olive branch of unity, an olive branch that let us have the passage of an immigration bill in a dignified manner that all of our people can see us joining hands, locking arms in national unity to pass. He said in transparent, I hope so. It has to be. That's the only way we can do. That's the only way we can achieve that. Let us join in arms as a collective body of legislators, because this is too important for us to have disunity and arguments over. We need to show this country, show our people, show our Cayman Islands that we could put politics aside and truly put our best foot forward and put their interests first and pass this piece of immigration legislation. Whatever the issues are, let us talk them through. Let us come up with a solution that all can rally behind and support, because it is too important. Colleagues, it is too important for us to be divided on this most important bill. And so, again, I congratulate the minister and his team. I thank all who have contributed to getting us to this point, even those in the prior administrations who have gotten us to this point. Because, you know, the one thing that I've learned in this thing called representational politics is I become very, very careful once you get off that campaign trail. You're the campaign trail, everybody, it's all open season, we know that. But once you get elected, the campaigning must stop and the governing must begin. And so I say, we're in the governance mode now, colleagues. This is about us governing. We're the ones that are the 19 that have been elected by the good people of our country. And so let us be very careful about how much we bash prior administrations and who did this and who didn't do that, because we don't know all the circumstances and how much work went in to try to fix differing issues. So we got to be very careful. And so this is my call on Thursday, the 11th of December, 2025, at 7:47 p.m. Thank you. Let us all join together. Oh, that was unkind. Let us all join together. I've been brief, members. Colleagues, I've been brief. Let us all join together as we govern these islands, and let us pass this piece of immigration legislation. Let us work together. Let us ensure that what is the outcome is better than we found it. Mr. Speaker, with those very brief remarks, I thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, just to get a gauge from members, I don't need it. My contribution will meet the definition of brief. And I haven't heard anything that the minister in his right of reply can't make short work of. So since I think the member for East End has a function he's trying to catch so that he can be socialize with his people, and we have a function in West Bay we're looking to socialize with our people if it's too late, people want to have supper, could we agree to adjourn now? I'll make a very short contribution, you can time me, 10 minutes. Let the minister do his right to reply, and then let's finish this debate tomorrow morning. Is that okay? Yeah. So I'm asking whether or not I could move the adjournment now. Yeah?
Oh, okay.
So in order to do that, Mr. Speaker, I'll have to add. I move the suspension of 14.1. So the business of the House can resume tomorrow at 11 a.m. rather than 2 p.m.
The question is that Standing Orders 14.1 be suspended to allow the House to start its business tomorrow at 11 a.m. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those against, no. The ayes have it. Standing order is suspended. No, you gotta move the
Thank you.
adjournment. You gotta move the adjournment first.
Mr. Speaker, I take it my proposal has the support of the House. Mr. Speaker, I move that this House do stand adjourned until tomorrow morning at 11 a.m.
The question is that this honorable House do stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow, Friday. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The House, therefore, is adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.